Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I wanted to talk about Akshan's revive and why it's not that big of a deal. I know when Akshan first was announced and people realized he had a revive on his kit, a lot of people got really scared really fast, and with good reason. Revive is one of only a handful of summoner spells that have ever existed that were removed from the game, period. A lot of the other summoner spells that were more niche, things like Clarity, those were moved to another game mode but still maintained at least, and Revive is one that didn't happen, that it straight up got taken out of the game permanently, and especially this isn't even just Revive the summoner spell that you have to opt into that takes a summoner spell slot that's on a long cooldown. Like, this is just everyone gets this, theoretically speaking, other than Akshan himself. You don't have to give up a summoner spell for it, and can theoretically happen, a lot more common than 9 minutes in the game. And so a lot of people are especially concerned about Akshan and what his potential is. And so I think it's fair to make an entire video here today talking about the Revive passive and why I think it's actually not as big of a deal as a lot of people are making it out to be. Now, a lot of the concern comes from the worst case scenarios, right? Where Akshan reverses a quadra kill and lets your team take Baron or push and end the game following a team fight that otherwise was super close. Or Akshan killed the guy who picked off his jungler, so his jungler's up, so you end up not being able to take Baron, or the Baron gets stolen because the jungler was there. Or Akshan kills a guy and revives his friend who then teleports back in and helps win the team fight from there, right? A lot of these situations are the biggest reasons and the biggest bugbears people have when talking about the Revive, and a lot of this ends up being, wow, that's so broken, that's super strong. Look how well, this pro player, this streamer played, only to die to Akshan and get all of that hard work they put in reverse in an instant, right? And that sort of leads a lot of people to start pointing fingers and saying, how is this fair? How is this balanced? How could this stay in the game? And I think that the thing that people don't understand, and I think that the thing that is difficult to comprehend, is that those are sort of isolated incidents. Statistically speaking, these sorts of things won't happen very often, and even if you want to just disregard gameplay entirely, if we just want to talk about percentages, right, and what percentage of games do double kills happen, and what percentage of games do triple kills or quadra kills happen, not very many. Quadra kills, I think I've maybe seen one in the last, 3 to 4 months, and in that regard, the literal odds for Akshan to reverse any of these super huge clutch plays are extremely limited just by the virtue of the fact that they don't happen that often, right? Akshan literally just doesn't have enough opportunities to reverse these plays and have that big, game-winning revive that ends up turning everything around. The other thing is that these are all assuming that Akshan just magically gets the kill somehow, right? We're not going to take into account anything that went into him getting the kill. We're just going to assume that, yeah, this thing happened and Akshan just said, no, it didn't, because I'm going to revive the guy that you guys killed. And that doesn't tell the full story, because it does deny a couple of facts that I think are really important with regards to Akshan actually getting a revive off. The first of which is that Akshan is an AD carry. I know that sounds obvious, but hear me out here. Akshan is an AD carry. He has a lot of traits that are similar to assassins. He has good burst damage. He has the ability to have good target access. He has stealth. He has mobility. There are a lot of tools there that Akshan has that sort of make him similar to an assassin. But also, he is still a marksman, and like I said in his review video, I think he gets the worst of both worlds in this regard. He has the ability to sneak up on someone in stealth and pop out and do a burst of damage, but very infrequently will that actually result in a kill. He isn't the kind of champion that will 100 to 0 you from stealth like a Talon or Rengar will, where those champions are invisible up until the moment that they appear on your face and you die. Akshan doesn't really have that. He sort of can burst you too low, but then he needs to continually auto-attack you or rely on his ultimate, which has a lot of counterplay to it, in order to actually finish off the kill from there. In that regard, he's a little less safe than these assassins, right? Assassins can afford to be fairly glass cannon because they don't have to worry about actually letting the enemy hit them back, right? The Zed normally, if he's getting hit, he's already made a mistake, right? He's already misplayed, or he, made a different mistake elsewhere in the lead up to that play happening, right? Like standing on a ward, and then the enemy champion was able to react to the assassination play the second it happened, as opposed to being caught off guard. In that regard, right, that's how assassins can kind of make that work, because generally speaking, the champion's dead before they have a chance to fight back. Akshan doesn't have that. He can pop out of stealth and get you low, but you're not dead yet, and if you're a champion that's very good at 1v1ing, or is very independent on their own, like a bruiser or an assassin of their own, Akshan is kind of screwed at that point, right, unless he gets an absolutely massive outplay, or unless you misplay yourself. And so in that regard, Akshan's burst pattern isn't very good, so he isn't going to be the kind of champion that disappears into stealth and just insta-gives you the second he shows up in your lane, right? There's a lot of opportunity for you to get around him in the meantime. The other thing that happens is that Akshan Akshan, if he wants the revive, will generally have to kill the scariest champion on the enemy team, because the most fed member of the enemy team is doing the most damage, and therefore they're the most likely to get any of the kills. So yeah, while it might sound like an easy situation of, oh, just kill the Viego and we all come back to life, but if that Viego is 17-0, the odds of Akshan doing that, an AD carry, a class that historically needs a support to even get to the late game and get their items, the odds of him doing that on his own with no help whatsoever from the rest of his team are slim to none. And I mean, we're talking like literally, unless Viego is one hit from death and Akshan can just kind of sneak up on him and kill him, it's not going to happen, because he has to try and fight this champion that's absolutely massive, or who's just really, really fed. Now, yeah, there will be some situations where a support happens to last hit their way to a triple kill, or the tank ends up getting a triple because they did really, really well in lane and they have decent base damage. Then, okay, yeah, Akshan has a better chance of making that play happen and reversing it because he has an easier target to kill. But I feel like in most situations, you're dealing with a fed mid laner or a fed AD carry or a fed bruiser, all of which will pretty much 1v1 Akshan pretty handily, unless, of course, it's an enemy AD carry who doesn't have the support of the rest of their team to help fend him off. Then maybe Akshan can sort of reverse that play. And this, all of which assumes that you don't use the obvious counterplay to Akshan's W, which is don't die. If you win a fight and take an objective and he's still alive, it makes sense to just recall if you have the scoundrel mark on you, because you don't want to die and give over that revive to Akshan, right? If you're back in base, there's very limited things he can do, and if he's trying to, like, you know, track you down through the jungle and find where you're at and equalize the kill while you're headed back to join your team, like, he's not protecting his base or contesting an objective or doing anything useful, right? He's running through the jungle hoping that maybe he finds you and maybe he can get the kill now that you're full health and have bought items following that fight, right? Like, that just doesn't make any sense. If you're pushing the base and you don't see Akshan, but you have the scoundrel mark, you can ward up your flanks. You're probably with your friends. And Akshan, again, is a marksman. They work best with a team. If he's on his own, there is very limited amounts of things that Akshan can actually do for you. The sort of playstyle of Akshan running through the jungle, invisible, trying to hunt down people who've killed his friends, is just not that viable unless he's turbo ahead. However, this does lead me to where the revive can be good, and that's Akshan playing with his team as a traditional marksman can do, because the threat of the revive is oftentimes more powerful than the revive itself. This is basically because if you are able to get a revive, usually it's not going to be the I revived 3 or 4 people and we won the game off the back of that. Usually it's more of a tempo play, right? If the enemy team picks off a member of your team to get you guys into a 4v5 scenario, and your Akshan goes off and kills their killer, not only does he equalize it, but he also brings back that friend. Now you're in a 5v4 in your favor, and you're able to make a 5-man power play at Baron or on an objective, or otherwise just push in, right? Or alternatively, if you have the sort of Clown Fiesta late game team fights where someone gets caught and then someone else dives in to try and save them, can't save them but is able to kill that guy, and then two other people show up, and those kind of long drawn out brawls, that's where Akshan can also thrive, because if he's able to get a kill on somebody or get a kill on someone who's gotten a double kill or something, those friends are reviving faster. So even though your team isn't assembled to actually pressure an objective, the fact that they're alive immediately and can start heading back to join that fight is a big tempo play and allows your team to keep the pressure on much better than the enemy team, because their team members are sitting out the death chambers, right? They have no way around that, and Akshan's team members have been liberated a little bit earlier. It also means that in a team fight, you have to be kind of careful around playing him, because a lot of times if you're trying to overextend for a play or try to really push in and make sure that you can end the game off the back of something, right? Like, it's difficult to have that fight, because if Akshan is able to freely hit you, right? Like, you're team fighting, but Akshan throws a boomerang through your whole team. At this point, if any of you get a kill and then die, Akshan is reviving whomever you killed. So if you dive super, super deep as an assassin just to make sure you got the enemy support dead because it's a Soraka and she's just going to heal her whole team, for example, but you die, and Akshan either got the last hit or hit you recently, it didn't matter that you dove that deep. Yeah, sure, you got the gold, but that support is revived and can immediately go rejoin the fight, right? And in that regard, it becomes a very delicate balancing act of, you kind of have to kill Akshan first in order to prevent that scenario from happening, or prevent Akshan from just kind of mitigating the damage dealt even in a losing team fight, but also, he's not always the easiest person to find. If he's hanging out in stealth or he's hanging out in a bush nearby and he's got good target access and good mobility, as we talked about, in that situation, the threat of Akshan suddenly appearing from stealth to last hit an enemy champion or to ult an enemy champion that's running away at low health who is a scoundrel, that's a lot more scary, and so you have to engage lightly. You can't go all the way deep for a kill, so maybe you don't actually kill the Vayne, who then gets to recall and come back, and you guys, maybe that affects the rest of the macro play elsewhere. There's a lot of sort of advantages for Akshan if he plays with his team and he's able to act not necessarily like a traditional marksman, because the sort of lurk and pounce motif isn't really a traditional marksman. I know Twitch does a similar thing, but that's sort of the another outlier rather than the traditional AD carry experience. But in that regard, Akshan playing with his team, saying, go ahead, fight a 4v5 for a moment, because I'll be able to join it afterwards and turn the tides with revives or with, you know, surprise damage on the backline, that's where he's going to show a lot of his value off, and that's where the revive can theoretically come into play and be strong. But generally speaking, these sort of miracle scenarios where people imagine Akshan reviving a quadra kill, they just don't happen. I think it does make sense for Akshan to be sort of a counter to a reset champion, right? Like Katarina or Master Yi, because they tend to push themselves super hard to kill as many people as possible before they sort of accept the fact that they're going to die. But if the person who hits you last is Akshan, then it didn't matter how hard you pushed yourself, right? Because they're just going to come back and then they'll be able to make a power play someplace. So in that regard, I think that's a fair niche for him to have, especially given that, again, this champion has no other utility other than the threat of this revive. Like, he literally does nothing else for the team other than damage and having maybe the ability to revive somebody. So I think at the end of the day, while yes, there are the possibilities for Akshan to have these big revive plays and to just blow somebody out with it, I think it's not that big of a deal. I think it does change the way in which you want to team fight and change the way in which you want to make cross-map plays. But fundamentally, I don't feel like it's altogether that unhealthy for the game, and I'm sort of interested to see what ends up happening once Akshan is finally in the pro player's hands. But let me know what you think of any of this down in the comment section below, or especially, you know, if you really still think I don't know what I'm talking about in terms of how strong this revive is, I'd love to hear your comments down in the comment section below. Go ahead and let me know. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave a like, and if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all later.